Hello, my little sleuths. Welcome to today's podcast episode. My name is Kylie Ramsey, and I am the host of this amazing podcast, The Serial Zodiac. And today I have a little treat for you guys. I am here with one of my other very, very best friends, Megan, and she's going to be hosting today's podcast with me. Megan has never heard of this case before, and honestly, before she came to this episode, she had no idea what the fuck we were going to be talking about today. So, that's always a fun one. But, I like to get right into the story. But before we do that, I'm going to let Megan introduce herself just so you guys can get to know her a little bit. So, Megan.
Hi guys. Thank you, Carly, so much for having me. I'm super excited. A longtime listener of your podcast, so I can't wait to be featured. A little nervous about this case, as Carly mentioned. I have no idea what we're going to talk about. I'm typically not a fan of the gorier cases, so I'm hoping it's a little lighter on that side. But yeah, let's dive in. I'm excited.
Thank you so much, Megan, for that introduction. And guys, today's episode is a very, very special one. We are covering our first female serial killer on the Serial Zodiac. And honestly, I feel like she's gonna make you guys question some things. So let's not lollygag on and get right into today's story. Warning: this podcast episode contains explicit language, mature themes, and thought provoking content. Listener discretion is advised, and it's not suitable for minors or the faint of heart. If you thought that it's easy to differentiate between a killer and a victim, Aileen's case will make you think otherwise. This was a woman who had every possible thing go wrong in her life. Right from the start, she lived a life where she was treated unfairly and brutalized in ways unimaginable. But in response, Aileen ended up becoming one of the most notorious serial killers in America's history. As you get to know her more, you'll face a dilemma. Should Aileen have faced the consequences of what she did? If not, how can one justify her actions?
I'm gonna
This
go and just put my prediction in here. I feel that Eileen's actions were probably justified. Being a woman, probably. Being a woman, this is my prediction at the top of the podcast. I think that if everything went wrong in my life as a woman, I bet it was a man's fault, and she probably didn't deserve what happened to her. I'm gonna say that from the top. We'll see if I eat my words towards the end of this, but right here, right now, Aileen was justified as a
okay,
woman.
okay. We will see. This is the story of America's first female serial killer, Aileen Wuornos.
Woo, women.
This woman was born with the name of Aileen Carol Pittman on February 29th, 1956, in Rochester, Michigan. Now, this makes her a Pisces. And
I'm a
her
Pisces hater. I want that to be established pretty early on here, is that I'm a Pisces hater. So my commentary might be biased.
I'm a Pisces, right?
Yeah, I do. You're one of the few Pisces that I like.
That's crazy.
But I dated a Pisces man. Maybe I'm just a Pisces man hater. Pisces
I
women
hate
can be
Pisces
okay.
men too, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate
Okay.
Pisces men.
All right. We're
So
Pisces men hater, but
we're
Pisces
right here.
women. Yeah. Pisces
Right
women
here.
approved.
And now, Aileen being born in Rochester, Michigan was probably the only conventional episode in her life. Pisces are known for being emotional, intuitive, and deeply sensitive. They're ruled by Neptune, the planet of dreams and illusions, which means they often have rich inner lives, but can be a bit, well, lost in their own world. And
Basically, they're
as a
delusional.
Pisces, I can confirm that this is true.
Yeah. Delusional.
Aileen's life was filled with trauma and hardship from a very young age. She faced severe abuse, abandonment, and a lot of pain. As a Pisces, she might have felt these experiences even more intensely. Pisces are also known for their tendency to escape when reality gets too harsh. And for Aileen, this might have meant turning to a life on the streets, using whatever means necessary to survive.
Oh my god. Was she sleeping with
Now,
people? Was she a prostitute?
she was. She was.
All right,
Now, let's
Eileen,
talk
get the
about her
bag.
crimes. Now, let's talk about her crimes. Aileen claimed that she killed these men in self defense, saying they were trying to assault her. In her mind, it was a matter of survival, striking back against the world that had only shown her cruelty. This reaction could have been seen through the lens of her Pisces nature, deeply feeling, highly reactive to perceived threats, and sometimes blurring the lines between reality and her emotional perception. Pisces can also be chameleons, adapting to their surroundings and sometimes losing themselves in the process. Aileen's life as a drifter and prostitute might have further eroded her sense of self, pushing her into a place where she felt she had no choice but to fight back in the most extreme ways.
Listen,
N-
as a woman, I feel like I can't go against Eileen for committing all these crimes against men. I mean, like you go out in the world and it's like sometimes I get nervous like being at my target because men can be a little something. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I have yet to feel as though that Eileen's actions probably weren't justified,
So I'm
especially she
assuming you're choosing the bear.
yes, I'm choosing the bear. She was living on the streets. She's a woman living on the streets. When was she born? Like the 50s, 60s? Like she probably didn't have a gun.
1969.
Yeah,
Oh, wait.
okay.
Hold on. Sorry. No, 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 no. 1956.
Yeah.
Sorry.
She probably had like no sense of self-defense. I mean,
She did have a hard life, but I feel like doing research into her, you'll see. She kind of bit the bullet eventually. And, like, yes, I also kind of agree that what happened to her was harsh. It was extremely harsh. I'm not going to lie. But I also feel that way in a lot of cases. But in hers in particular, I'm not going to get ahead of myself. You'll see. You'll
okay,
see.
no
I'll explain it
spoilers.
once we get there. But
No spo-
basically, I felt like because she was being dubbed as America's first female serial killer, they really threw the book at her. But I
of
also
course they did
don't,
because she's a woman.
but
She's
I
a
also
woman.
feel like they were kind of justified in throwing the book at her because of how she acted. Like, she didn't really, once again, getting ahead of myself. We'll
Okay.
explain it when we get there.
We won't spoil it, but just as a check-in, I'm still on Team Eileen. I still think she was justified in whatever it is she did.
Okay. Now, it's important to remember that astrology is just one look at this complex story. It doesn't excuse her actions, but it might offer some insight into the inner turmoil she experienced. So, Aileen's life and crimes are a tragic mix of personal suffering, societal failure, and maybe a touch of that Piscean depth and despair. At a very young age of 14, her mother, Diane Aileen, married an 18-year-old Leo Pittman on June 3rd, 1954, and
Wait,
divorced
wait.
him shortly after Aileen's birth.
They were 18 years old. Her parents were 18 years old when they got married, or
Well, her mom was 14 and her dad was 18.
oh my gosh, she was 14 years old. Okay, Eileen wasn't set up for success. I didn't,
Yeah. Her
not set up
being
for
born was
success.
literally the only normal episode in her life. She
That's not
was
even
born to a
normal.
14-year-old mom, and I mean, like, it is normal to be born, but like past that, like, she was born to a 14-year-old mom and an 18-year-old dad.
Yeah. Okay. Valid. And he leaves right after she's born.
um we're getting there.
Okay.
So she was married to 18-year-old Leo Pittman on June 3rd, 1956, and she divorced him shortly after Aileen's birth. She was barely 16 at the time. And who had acquired the status of a mother when she gave birth to a girl in the summer. Aileen never received an opportunity to meet her father, a criminal who ended his life in prison. He had a troubled life that led him to prison in 1967 for kidnapping and raping a 7-year-old little girl.
Ew.
Yeah.
Boo this man. Ugh,
Yeah.
disgusting. See, this is why Eileen did what she did and she's justified.
This is not why she did what she did. But moving on. Diagnosed with schizophrenia, Leo's story ended tragically when he took his own life in prison on January 30th, 1969. Abandonment and instability marked the early years of Aileen. When she was almost 4, her mother Diane left her and her brother Keith with their grandparents. Lori and Bridie Aileen. Lori and Bridie, both alcoholics, took legal responsibility for the children on March 18th of 1960. Yet the home was anything but a shelter to the girl. At a young age, Aileen's behavior began to take a deviant form. In her school days, she would perform sexual favors for
What?
cigarettes. Yeah.
Oh my
And
god.
she's like, I want to say like she was like 14 around when this stuff started. But
Okay, well, this, she's from a broken home. Her mom got pregnant at 14. This feels really like the environment she was in put her in this situation.
so I find that when I do a lot of these podcasts, yes, they have bad lives, but not to like put my business out there. But I feel like I also had a rough childhood and I didn't turn out to be a serial killer. So I feel like having a rough childhood doesn't necessarily always justify you in becoming a serial killer. So yeah. That's just
My
my hot take. Like I used to have so much sympathy for these people, and then I thought about it and I was like, damn, like I had a fucking rough childhood too, and I didn't turn to murdering people. But
I didn't become a murderer. Okay, so my therapist and I have like talked about this where she's like, people in like bad home situations like this, they either lean into like what it is that their parents did, or they like be completely avoidant to it. So she probably just leaned into what she knew was familiar
yeah,
because it
and
was like the
that's
only
how
thing
I
that was
find some
stable.
people. Like some people like really just lean into it. But then there's other people that like they had great childhoods and they were just like fucked up in the head. So it's
Yeah.
like there's like really I would say like there's really no I used to think before I started this podcast that like it was because these people had like horrible lives or whatever, but it's not that's not always the case. I feel like sometimes there could be like mental issues that are overlooked. And once again, not to get ahead of myself, but in Aileen's case, I really do like, yes, her childhood may have affected or like had an effect on her outlook in the world, but also at the same time, I feel like there were underlying mental health issues that weren't addressed either
And we'll kind of get into some of those like later on in the case. But like I feel like in her case, there were really just like mental health issues that were kind of like overlooked, if that makes sense.
Yes, makes sense. Okay, let's learn more about Aileen.
So, at a young age, Eileen's behavior began to take a deviant form. In her school days, she would perform sexual favors to get cigarettes, drugs, food, and this was a clear sign that things at home were not any steadier. She later confessed that her grandfather had been sexually abusing her. Yeah. But once again, it gets wild.
Disgusting. Wrong.
But it gets wild too.
Oh no.
So, thus, another one of the details of a stressful childhood emerged. He would also beat her
Oh my
and would
God.
force her to take off all of her clothes while doing so.
Ah, what the fuck? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. In 1960, Aileen's life took another sharp turn. At just 14, she got pregnant after a family friend had raped her, and
Ah.
she gave birth to a baby boy on March 23rd, 1971.
Oh
That
God.
child was then put up for adoption, and in addition to that, Aileen dropped out of school. This period also saw her grandmother die of liver failure, leaving Aileen even more lost.
Oh
At
God, I hope she
15,
ran away.
At 15, things went from bad to worse after being told to leave the house by her grandfather. Homeless and desperate, Aileen started to live in the woods around her old home.
What? That's such a okay. That's such a choice. Like, I feel like I wouldn't have picked to live in the again.
But
Different people.
so she didn't really. Well, let me finish this, and I'll go into like more detail as to like why she didn't really have any options.
Okay. All right.
So she was told to leave the house by her grandfather. She was homeless and desperate. Aileen started to live in the woods around her old home. And haunted under the misery of a hostile world, she earned her living through prostitution, leading her down a terrible road from where she could never return. From its very inception, her life had paved the way with mishaps for her to go down the tragic path that she would eventually take. So she got pregnant at 14. At 15, she was told to leave the house by her grandfather. And at this point, like, obviously she was homeless, but Aileen also didn't really have friends. So, whereas her brother also got kicked out of the house around the same time. So, like, it wasn't just her. Her grandpa kicked both of them out and was basically like, yeah, I'm done. Fuck this. Leave. And I want to say it was because they were probably just a lot to handle because, I mean, like, I don't think that this is in here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. Um, her and her brother were like having sex with each other.
Yeah, I was gonna say, bet they're lovers, knowing like where
Yeah,
this story is going.
her and her brother were like having sex with each other. They were extremely close. They were like best friends, but nonetheless, they were sleeping with each other. And in addition to sleeping with him, she was also sleeping with, like I said, a number of boys from the neighborhood. So it was like this little area that they would go to. It was like the hangout spot for the kids. And they would go there and essentially hang out. And Aileen didn't really have any friends. And so whenever she started doing these quote unquote sexual favors, she found that she didn't find that it made her more popular. She felt like it made her more popular, and she felt like people liked her more when she did things like this. So she would frequently do things like this for the attention. It's like the attention that she wasn't getting at home, she found it in these other boys. So she would go and do these sexual favors for them. And she found that, like, whenever she did sexual favors for people, they liked to hang out with her more. They invited her to more stuff, things like that. And so, yeah, that's why she was doing it, because she liked the attention. And I mean,
This is
as
where
a
I'm surprised.
14-year-old who, one, has a horrible family life, two, isn't very popular in school, and three, is being abused, any attention that you get from someone else who's kind of like validating what it is that you're doing, I feel like that's always, like, in a child's mind, gonna be perceived as, like, quote unquote positive. Even
Right.
like, you know how like people are like, oh, like, all press is good press. That's
Yeah.
kind of like how her mind was. Like, it's all attention is good attention. Like, even when her grandfather used to like beat the shit out of her, like, there was one case where, like, there was one situation where I guess she had skipped school with a friend, and her grandpa found out, and the friend and her were walking back to her house, and the grandpa literally like made her bend over his lap, and he like beat the shit out of her while the friend watched. And like, he knew the friend was watching.
Ew. That's so
Yeah.
gross. Here's the
Yeah.
thing where I'm like, I'm a little shocked or surprised, is I feel like if, like, my question is, why would she stay in the area? I feel like me and my brother Keith, I would have packed my bags and gotten as far the heck away as I possibly could. You know what I mean? Like, especially Michigan with the winter. Like, you're out in the woods braving the elements. Like, I would have been like, all right, Keith, we're going to Florida, where at least if we're going to be homeless, we're homeless in the sun. You know what I mean? Like,
You're so funny, because that's actually exactly what she ends up doing as she gets older.
there you go. All
But she
right.
doesn't take her brother.
Oh, well, that's probably that could be for the best if they were in love. So maybe some separation.
But yeah, her brother ended up, like, they both, like I said earlier, they both got kicked out at the same time, but he ended up being able to like stay at a friend's place, and she just didn't have that luxury because she just wasn't liked. Like, I know that sounds shitty, but like, she just simply wasn't liked. So
I simply would have left then. I would have been like, bye, Keith. Bye. But also, boo Keith for not like being like, hey, like, I also have my sister. Do you think she can maybe stay here too? Like, who just picks Keith? Keith isn't even the name of a guy you should be picking. It's like Josh, Keith. You know what I mean? Those are the boys that you don't marry. Those are the red flag boys.
not Keith is a red flag name.
Keith is a red
That's
flag name.
hilarious. That's actually quite hilarious. All right. So Aileen Wuornos lived a life of commotion and mystery. It all began on May 27th, 1974, when 18-year-old Aileen found herself on the wrong side of the law in Jefferson County, Colorado. She had been arrested for driving under the influence, raising a ruckus, and ultimately for shooting a .22 caliber pistol from a moving car. She didn't make her court appearance by June 2nd, which added another charge to her growing docket.
Why would she have gone? Like, let's be serious. We know enough about this girl. I'm surprised that they thought she would have shown up to her
I
court
mean,
appearance.
but you know, people, like, I feel like officers give tickets all the time, and like, they're like banking on people not showing up. Because, like, you know, if you don't show up, then obviously the court rules in favor of, like,
in favor of the law.
yeah. So they rule in, I don't know why I just lost my train of thought there for a second. But the court rules in favor of the law, and then it's like you have to just pay the fine or whatever. But like, most people don't show up. It's like when you get a ticket, like when I got a ticket, I didn't show up.
I showed up, but I showed up to fight it, so it would be reduced. And it was.
Oh, well, I just got someone to fix it for me.
Oh my god. Well, clearly.
Wait, I don't know if you're supposed to say that shit out loud.
We might need to stop and delete this one.
It's okay. We're just gonna keep going. That didn't happen, guys. That didn't happen. But then the second time that same month when I got a ticket, I think I like just cried a little bit, and I'm pretty sure like he was just like, "I'll just give you a warning."
Oh my god. Well,
Yeah, good actor right here, babes. If any police officers are listening to this, please. That's literally my trick to get.
I feel like the cops know. I feel like they know that women cry to get out of tickets.
Okay, side note. And then I swear we're going to get back to Aileen. One time when I was 18, my boyfriend had cheated on me and he lived. I know, putting all my business out here on the internet. I was 18 and my boyfriend cheated on me. And I was like distraught driving to this man's place. Why was I driving to his place? Because I needed to know the truth. So I'm driving to his place. Mind you, he lived like an hour and a half away from me. So it was a far as fuck drive for me to realize that this was a bad fucking decision, and I still did it anyway. So drove there. You had to go through like this little fucking town. And it was like nighttime, and I like fully ran the stop sign.
Oh.
I got pulled over immediately. Immediately. And the man goes, "Did you not see that stop sign?" And I said, "Oh my God, my brakes, they're just not right."
My brakes just...
He goes, "I'm going to give you a warning, but make sure you get that fixed."
Oh my god. Honestly, that's a pretty solid excuse. That's a pretty good one.
Why the fuck would you be driving around with brakes that don't work?
Let me tell you something. So when I was in college, I went to go visit my boyfriend who went to a different college, and I drove all the way from my college in Massachusetts to his college in Rhode Island. And I literally pulled in to his college and my brake light went on. And I called my stepdad and I was like, "My brake light just went on." And he's like, "Well, do they work?" And so I did like a little test drive and they were like, "Not really." And so I drove from Rhode Island to Connecticut with no brakes. It was a 90-minute drive.
Love that for you. Bro, this is why we're friends, because we're both just dumb bitches.
90 minutes with no brakes.
Why are we driving to see these men? You know what? Back to Aileen. This was never about us.
Okay, but can you see here why Eileen's actions were probably justified as a woman if her main targets were men? You see what men do to women?
You know, it's never about us.
It's about women.
We did not have to put this information out on the internet. We look desperate. It's fine. We're going back to Aileen.
Okay, Aileen, she was in Colorado. She missed her hearing or whatever. Let's do this.
Okay, yeah. So now she didn't make it to the court appearance, like I said before. It was by June 2nd that she had to make it there. So this was another charge that was added to her growing docket. Now, Aileen had hitchhiked to Florida in 1976, where she met Louis Grazie Fell.
Oh, no.
A 69-year-old president of a yacht club. Side note.
Daddy!
The sugar daddies in Florida? The sugar daddies in Florida? All right. Aileen, my girl, you were doing something right when you found him.
Right?
He was a 69-year-old president of a yacht club, and their whirlwind romance soon progressed to marriage.
Oh, congrats, girl.
I know. Look at Aileen trying to get her little life together.
Right. I'm going to be really devastated when it falls apart because I feel like this could have been it for her.
Their union was formally announced in the society pages of the local newspaper. Aileen, however, difficult from the start, she engaged in frequent brawling at the local watering hole and even landed a jail sentence for assault.
Oh my God, Aileen.
When she attacked Bell with his own cane only a few weeks into the marriage, he was prompted to get a restraining order against his wife. Aileen fled back to Michigan, but July 14th, 1976, found Aileen back in trouble. This time at Bernie's Club in Mansalina, Michigan. So yeah, she found a sugar daddy. I feel like this could have been her out, honestly.
She blew it. Yeah,
I
I'm a
feel like
little
this really could have been her out. Like, he would have kicked the bucket. You didn't have to beat him with the cane.
Right?
At this point, she was like 18. He definitely would have died.
Right? No, exactly. She could have
He would have died. You could have gotten the money.
She didn't need to fight anybody. She could have just
She
been
didn't
a
even
quiet
need to.
housewife.
She didn't need to beat him with the cane.
She didn't
And
do
this
anything.
is where I say she has like, I feel like throughout this, you're gonna see that she has like this temper. Like, she's a good actress, but then like she just kind of goes off the rails, for lack of better words. Like, it's like these spurts of like violence. Like, she just like gets enraged about something and then she just starts beating people with canes.
Okay, but to argue the other side of it, do we know what provoked it? Like, what if this old man did something gross and,
I feel like you
triggered
keep
her?
giving her excuses.
That's because I support women's rights just as much as I support women's wrongs. And I just feel like Aileen might have been justified to be a little wrong at certain times with the childhood she had.
You know, I just don't think that beating someone with a cane, I just feel like you can't ever really justify that.
What if it was
I mean, at the age of 18, granted, she did have a hard childhood, but like, listen, at 18, you should know that you can't beat someone with a cane.
I mean, you're not wrong, but I wonder if she was triggered. Like, I wonder if something happened to her and it was like, no, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you.
You married a 70-year-old.
Yeah, maybe he did something gross. Maybe he did something that
but
reminded
you
her
married
of her
a 70-year-old. Did you think you were never gonna have to be intimate with said 70-year-old? You're married.
Probably not. He's 70.
I mean, she could have gave him sleeping pills. You know what? Stop it. Okay, we're getting back to Aileen. She had been arrested after throwing a cue ball at a bartender. She's
Honestly,
having a hard
such
time.
A choice. That's such a
She's
choice.
having a hard time, bro. Assaultants and disturbing the peace. Just 3 days later, her brother Keith succumbed to esophageal cancer, leaving Aileen $10,000 from his life insurance. So,
oh my God! Shout out to
snaps for
Keith.
him.
He wasn't
Shout
there
out
for her
to
in
Keith.
life. Not there in life, but definitely in death. Let's go, Keith.
$10K?
What could you have done with $10K in like 1970 something? That's actually probably good money. I'm not an economics person, but
I have very intrusive thoughts running through my head right now, and I'm not going to say them out loud. We're just going to keep reading.
You can tell me later.
So, her brother succumbed to esophageal cancer, leaving her $10,000 from his life insurance. Shortly after, she and Phil annulled their marriage.
The guy she beat with a cane that got a restraining order? Yeah, that's not surprising.
The yacht club president, my bad. By August, Aileen had received a ticket for drunk driving. With her inheritance, she paid off the drunk ticket and then squandered the rest on a new car, which she promptly wrecked.
All right.
So, she's back broke again. It's basically what I'm trying to say. There goes the 10K. A ticket and a car that she immediately wrecked.
I wonder what kind of car it was. I hope it was at least like a good car.
I don't know. I feel like I didn't get that far. I didn't really, I mean, like, it was a car and she wrecked it. It was very short-lived.
Well, hopefully it was worth it.
Clearly it wasn't, but in 1978, the year she turned 22, Aileen went even further over the edge. She shot herself in the stomach as an apparent suicide attempt.
You know what? If I blew 10K like she did, I could see where we might be getting into that dark space.
So apparently this wasn't her first try. She had attempted suicide between the ages of 14 and 22 at least 6 other times, including bloodletting with shards of glass and razor blades.
Oh my goodness.
So if you don't know what bloodletting is, it's basically where you just like cut yourself and let yourself bleed. That's what bloodletting is. You basically just like
You bleed
slit a
out.
part of your body, whether it be like your wrist or your thigh, and you just let it bleed until it hopefully stops. Or it doesn't.
And then you
And
die.
you meet the great creator. Whatever you believe in, you meet that. On May 20th, my gosh, train of thought lost. On May 20th of 1981, Aileen's crime spree continued as she was arrested in Edgewater, Florida for armed robbery of a convenience store where she stole $35 and 2 packs of cigarettes. Fun fact, when she robbed this store, she was actually in a bikini.
You know, I feel like Aileen could have a movie about her, and it could be a really fun movie.
Aileen does have a movie about her.
Oh my god, she does? What's the movie called?
Yeah. It was made in 2003. I believe it's called Monster.
Monster.
I think it's on Amazon Prime.
Oh my god, it is. Okay, I'm gonna have to watch that movie after this.
See, I do my research. I did not watch the movie to research this because I feel like whenever I like watch things for research purposes, I lean more towards documentaries because they give you like the facts, no chaser. But with movies, they try to make it entertaining. And sometimes all the things in those movies aren't necessarily true, or they're sometimes exaggerated a bit. So, yeah, I didn't watch this movie, but after this, I probably will.
That's how I kind of feel about like Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile, the Zac Efron Ted Bundy movie, or like
Oh yeah, they definitely I wouldn't say they necessarily like lie completely, but I know for a fact that they like exaggerate things to make it more entertaining. Which I mean,
right.
like, I feel like Americans anyway have like this sick fantasy with like murder as
Oh,
someone who has a freaking
sick fantasy with
serial
murder.
killer podcast. Um, but yeah, Americans are like obsessed with serial killers. That's why people find Ted Bundy so attractive.
You know what? I have to support that because I watched that movie. I remember the first time I watched it, I like kind of walked away from it, and I was like, you know what? If a man that looked like Zac Efron came up to me and was like, "Can you help me with this?" I would say yes, and then I would be murdered. I would have been a Ted Bundy victim if he looked as much like Zac Efron. Like I
Have you ever
absolutely.
seen like pictures of Ted Bundy?
Yeah, he does not look like Zac Efron. I tell you that much. But
Well, apparently for like back then, like he was actually very attractive. But he like when he was in jail, he actually like had people frequently like write him and like tell them that they loved him. Like he basically had a fan club in jail.
yeah, because I guess he was hot, which is why I feel like if I was out in the world and was in like a situation that like they were showing us with Ted Bundy, I absolutely like the way that he picked up like the FSU girls was he was at a bar and they went back to their sorority house. Like I guarantee to you, I would be at a bar, I would have him come up to me and would be like, "Yeah, of course you could come back home with me," and then he would murder me in my sorority house. You know what I mean? I would have
Honestly,
been a
I
Ted Bundy
love you to
victim.
death, but I could definitely see you getting murdered. Moving
Yeah.
on. She was sentenced to prison on May 4th of 1982. She was released on June 30th, 1983. But for Aileen, trouble was never far away. On May 1st of 1984, she was arrested in Key West.
Girl is getting places. All right, we're in Michigan, we're in Florida, we're in Colorado, we're back in Michigan, we're in Florida again. Girl is on the move.
Yeah, she's hitchhiking.
I love that for her. She is seeing the country.
Seemed like 4 states. um, on May 1st, 1984, she was arrested in Key West for trying to pass forged checks. In October, she was the suspect in the theft of a .38 caliber revolver and ammunition from a convicted felon in Pasco County. I think that's how you pronounce that. And then on January 4th of 1986, found Aileen back in jail, this time in Miami for being in possession of a stolen car. She resisted arrest and offered the police false identification by stealing her aunt's name. More ammunition was found in her pocket, and a .38 caliber revolver and several other items were found in the car. Later that year, on June 2nd, she was interviewed by Volta County deputy sheriffs who received a report that a male companion accused her of pulling a gun on him and demanding $200. Spare ammunition found on her person and in her vehicle under the passenger seat was a .22 pistol. Within the madness of this life, Aileen experienced what could have been considered true love. In 1986, she met 24-year-old Tyra Moore, a motel maid, at a Daytona Beach gay bar called Zodiac.
Oh my God. How ironic.
The two soon moved in together, with Aileen supporting them both with her prostitution money. This relationship was not without its share of dramas. Police in Daytona Beach arrested the couple on suspicion after alleged assault and battery with a beer bottle on July 4th, 1987. Aileen accused a Daytona bus driver of assault on March 12, 1988, saying that he pushed her off the bus after the pair scuffled. Tyra Moore was listed as a witness to the incident. During her trial, Aileen said, "I have feelings too. I'm human. My feelings were beyond words. I prayed for you all. The sin must fall on someone's shoulders, not mine. Thank you. The love of Tyra Moore and me is considered unbelievable, almost unknown in human experience." End quote. Even before her death, she said that she was still in love with Tyra. So Tyra was her downfall. You just really want me to be honest with you. Yeah, her love for Tyra is really, she basically loved Tyra so much that she didn't want her to like go down for like her shit. So yeah, she kind of just let Tyra
ruin her.
Yeah, blame everything on her.
Ugh, unbelievable.
I mean, in my opinion, I do believe that we'll get there.
All right, we'll get there.
It was in the shadows that the story of Aileen Wuornos was born, who managed to kill 7 men within a year and became one of the most notorious personalities in the world of crime. All her victims were from the motorist community, aged between 40 and 65 years. All of them suffered a tragic end from one woman's hands. It all started with Richard Charles Mallory, owner of an electronic shop in Clearwater. Dropping Aileen from the car, the 51-year-old man drove to a place deserted. She claims that he began to assault, rape, and sodomize her after they had agreed on her providing him sexual services, and thereafter things spiraled out of control. She shot Charles in self-defense, she stated.
You know what? She probably did. If a man...
Okay, so throughout this case, when I was researching, I was like, okay, self-defense, But I think where it was hard for me to believe the self-defense claim from her was when it was after she shot 7 people.
Oh,
Like, let's be honest, self-defense, maybe a third time self-defense, but 7 times. And I get it, you're a prostitute. But I feel like after the first time I would have went to the police. Like, you don't in self-defense cases, you don't kill someone and then not call the police.
right.
You don't kill someone and then wait for the police to find their body, and then after they find the body and find out you did it, it's like, oh, it was in self-defense. But then it's like, if it was true self-defense, then why didn't you call the police?
I don't know, maybe with the record she had, she probably didn't think that the police were her friends. So maybe she was like a little nervous to call them.
Yeah, but you shot 7 people, and now you're claiming all 7 of them were self-defense?
Maybe. I mean, I wonder if, like, in these situations, if the guy took it too far, or if maybe she was triggered, you know what I mean? Like,
I feel like you're giving her the benefit of the doubt. Let's
I
keep
really
going.
am.
Let's keep going.
Okay.
She doesn't really deserve it. Let's keep going. Volta County Deputy Sheriff found Charles's deserted car 2 days later after the incident on November 30th, 1989. His body was found on December 13th in a wooded area several miles from where his car was found. He had been shot multiple times. The most significant, 2 bullets had hit his left lung. It was found out later that Charles had a criminal history and had been booked for attempted rape in Maryland even before this incident.
See? See?
Next in line was David Andrew Spears, a construction worker aged 47 from Winter Garden. Oh my God, Winter Garden. Shout out to Winter Garden.
Wow. Carly and I used to live there.
Okay. Construction worker aged 47 from Winter Garden, who was reported missing on May 19th, 1990. His body was found on June 1st, 1990. Roadside along
long time.
US. Huh?
That's a long time. Reported missing May 19th and not found until June 1st.
Yep.
That's long.
At least it was in the same year.
That is fair. That is true.
Roadside along US 19 in Citrus County. He was shot 6 times with a .22 caliber pistol. But this was the beginning of the gruesome discovery of deaths and future victims. Now, forewarning, I'm 1000% gonna mispronounce this man's last name. So my listeners, you know that I am horrible at pronouncing names, so don't come for me, bitches. Anyway, Charles Edmund Carskadon, I think
Good
that's
enough.
how you pronounce that. I'm just gonna spell it. Maybe somebody will comment. Carskaddon. That's the name. A 40-year-old rodeo worker on a part-time basis was Aileen's third known victim. He was killed.
Rodeo worker. Do you think he worked at Disney?
No, he probably worked at a real rodeo.
Are there rodeos in Florida?
Probably.
Oh my God. Okay.
I mean, it was the 90s. So this was her third known victim. He was killed on May 31st, 1990, and was found on June 6th in Pasco County. Charles had been shot 9 times with a .22 caliber weapon. His body was wrapped in an electric blanket and not much later left to rot away. Witnesses later reported that they saw Aileen in his car, and she had pawned a gun that belonged to him. Peter Abraham Sims was a 65-year-old retired merchant seaman, and he was last seen leaving Jupiter, Florida in June of 1990, and he was en route to Arkansas. Peter's car was discovered in Orange Springs, Florida on July 4th, 1990. Witnesses saw Aileen and Tyra Moore inside this car. And then Aileen's handprint was found on the interior door handle. Peter's body was never found, so his disappearance is just another creepy factor involved.
And he's what,
Troy,
number 4? We're on our
yeah,
4th guy? Okay.
yeah. We're on, I believe it's number 4. Yeah, I think it's number 4. Troy Eugene Burris was a 50-year-old sausage salesman reported missing on July 31st, 1990 from Ocala, Florida. Shout out to Ocala.
Woo, Ocala!
His body was located on August 4th in a wooded area off State Road 19 in Marion County. Troy
Okay.
had been shot twice.
Here's the thing. If she wasn't hiding these bodies, I would be like, self-defense all the way. But I don't know, this...
You see what I mean? Like,
The
it's hard to
electric
believe
blanket,
self-defense whenever
Yeah.
you're murdering people and then hiding them. And then not only are you murdering them and hiding them, but you're murdering them, hiding them, and then not telling the fucking police that you just killed somebody. Like, here's the thing. If I were to murder someone and claim self-defense, I would kill them and then immediately call the police. Distraught.
Yeah, probably.
Like, let's just be real. Like, no one's claiming self-defense and hiding bodies.
Correct. Nobody's doing that. I mean, if you left it at the scene of a crime, sure, and you could, like, probably plead, like, I was under emotional duress and didn't know what to
But
do.
7 times?
7 times. 7 times in hiding the body.
It's a
Yeah.
little extreme.
A little sus.
Like, I think that's really what got me with this whole case. Because I'm like, okay, like, I really do want to believe that this was in self-defense. But in good consciousness, I fucking can't. Because you killed 7 people.
Right?
And you actively tried to hide their bodies. Like, yes, some of them were found, but literally we just saw that, like, one of them wasn't even found.
Right.
So it's like you were actively killing people and hiding their bodies. And I get the self-defense claim, but I don't get why you would hide the bodies in a self-defense claim.
No, I agree. That makes sense.
Makes no sense.
No sense. No sense that she's hiding them.
Yeah. So Charles Richard Dick Humphreys was a 56-year-old retired U.S. Air Force major, as well as a former state child abuse investigator who was slain on September 11th, 1990. His fully clothed body was located a day later in Marion County, being shot 7 times in the head and torso. His car was later found in Suwannee County. Walter Geno Antonio was a 62-year-old trucker, security guard, and reserve police officer that was located in Dixie County on November 19th, 1990, near Remote Lodging Road. He had been shot 4 times and was found wearing only shorts. His car was found in Brevard County 5 days later. Aileen's reign of terror continued and led to a lot of fear and destruction. Each victim's story revealed layers of complexity and darkness in her life, painting a picture of a woman driven to such extreme measures by her circumstances and perhaps something deeper within her psyche. But a question might linger in your brain. Was she just a cold-hearted killer, or was she also a victim?
I think she's a victim still. I mean, a little sus that she's hiding these bodies, I will say that. But she could have honestly had a psychotic break. After all the trauma she's endured in life, maybe this is it. Maybe this is like revenge on her grandfather and revenge on her dad and like revenge on all the other boys that took advantage of her. So I don't know. Maybe she needed mental health professionals to be taking care of her, and she wasn't receiving that. So I don't know. I think she's a victim.
I love your optimism.
I really am trying to bright side this. We support women's rights and we support women's wrongs.
Okay. On July 4th, 1990, after she had crashed Peter Sims' car, Aileen Wuornos and her girlfriend, Tyra Moore, were in a real fix. Rhonda Bailey had witnessed the entire accident and gave police a description of the two women. This was a lead crucial in front of the media campaign, moving out to track them down. For example, things began to unravel when some of the victims' belongings were turning up in pawn shops. A print of a fingerprint and a pawn shop purchase receipt matched a print found in Sim's car. This was because the record of Aileen's criminal past in Florida was already on file. The Last Resort was a biker bar in Volta County that became infamous as it was the place where Aileen was finally arrested on January 9th, 1991, while having a drink. The police nabbed her on an outstanding warrant using the alias Lori Grody. The next day, Moore was found in Pittston, Pennsylvania. Moore received immunity in exchange for helping the police obtain a confession from Aileen. She was set up in a motel back in Florida where she made several calls to Aileen, begging her for help to clear her name. Aileen took the bait, and 3 days later, she confessed to the murder, saying she acted in self-defense because the men tried to rape her. In an even more surprising development, in November of 1991, Aileen was legally adopted by 44-year-old Arlene Prell, who had seen her photo in a newspaper and felt a connection. All right.
What?
Let's stop right there. That was
What?
honestly, Aileen murdering people, cool. Not cool. So sorry to those victims and their families. That was the weirdest part of this entire fucking case.
That was wild.
It gets wilder.
Remind me,
So
how old was she?
Aileen was like in her 30s when this lady adopted
Legally
her.
adopted?
Let me tell you why.
What?
So Arlene legally adopted her because at the time, Aileen was in prison because she had admitted to these murders, right? So she was in prison, and I guess back then, well, and maybe it's still a thing, I'm not really sure. But back then, or like I said, maybe now, you can only visit people who you're related to. And so, in order to visit her in prison, she adopted her legally. And so, once you adopt someone, you become their mother. So, the 44-year-old adopted, I want to say Aileen was like 36 when she adopted her, 35, 36. So she adopted her because she saw her on TV and she had this incredible connection with her. And she could just see in Aileen's eyes that she was a good person. And God told her that she just needed to go and connect with Aileen and show her love. Yeah, it was a whole thing. Like, to the point to where, like, this lady, she was like a very intricate, like she was very much like in Aileen's life. Like she adopted her so that way she could become her mom. Like her and her husband did it so they could become her parents and go visit her in prison. And that's why they adopted her.
That is wild. I mean,
Yeah.
that definitely took some creative and strategic thinking.
It was actually under the suggestion of Aileen's lawyer.
I see where the lawyer would have been coming from on that angle, though. You know what I mean?
Honestly, it came to bite him in the butt, though. We'll see that later. But that decision of him telling her to do that came to bite him in the ass. Because Aileen started basically only listening to her, and because this lady was quote unquote like, I don't think she used this term, but what I would call it is like a warrior for God. she basically essentially convinced Aileen to tell the truth.
So she
Which maybe
basically
isn't
had
a
her
bad thing.
confess.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. But I will say, if you ever go to jail, even if you have a public defender, they went to law school.
Right?
You didn't. I feel like it would be in your best interest to
listen to
listen
the
to
lawyer.
them. Not some random lady who adopted you when you were 36 and she was 44 just so that way she could come and hang out with you. Honestly, during this time, a lot of people were wanting to get connected with Aileen because, she, like I said, she was being dubbed as America's first female serial killer. So obviously the media is in a frenzy. Obviously Hollywood is like, let's get on this. Let's make movies. Let's make money. So yeah, I wonder. We'll get to it.
All right, we'll get to it.
Aileen's trial for the murder of Richard Charles Mallory began on January 14th, 1992. The prosecution used Florida's Williams rule to introduce evidence of her other crimes, establishing a pattern of illegal activity. On January 27th, 1992, the jury found Wuornos guilty of Charles's murder, primarily on testimony by Moore, her girlfriend, or I would
The girl that played her, girl that threw her
I
under
would
the bus.
beg to say that she's now her ex.
Yeah.
um Psychiatrists for the defense testified at her sentencing that Aileen was mentally unstable and had been diagnosed with BPD, or borderline personality disorder, and antisocial personality disorder. Nonetheless, she was sentenced to death 4 days later.
Oh my
At
god.
Aileen's sentence hearing, her defense attorney at her trial tried to enter into evidence stating that Charles had been committed for several years, but the judge, along with the request for a retrial, denied having the information admitted at Aileen's sentencing. On March 31st, 1992, Aileen pleaded no contest to the murders of Charles Richard Humphreys, Troy Eugene Burris, and David Andrew Spears, and she was claiming she wanted to, quote unquote, get right with God. On May 15th, 1992, she received 3 more death sentences. In June of 1992, Aileen pleaded guilty for the murders of Charles Edmund Carskadon and was sentenced to death. By February 1993, Aileen pleaded guilty to the murder of Walter Geno Antonio and was sentenced to death again. Aileen was not tried for the murder of Peter Abraham Sims, as his body was never found. Overall, Aileen received death sentences 6 times.
6 out
During
of
her
7.
during her imprisonment, Aileen gave several different versions of the murders. She alleged initially that all 7 men had raped her while she was working as a prostitute, but redacted that statement later. On other occasions, she alleged that she began killing in self-defense. In an interview by filmmaker Nick Broomfield, she confessed off camera to it being self-defense, but that she couldn't take killing men and being on death row anymore, and she wanted to die. She did not have the will to defend herself and simply wanted the entire ordeal to come to an end. All right, my hot take.
All right, let's hear it.
So this is what I mean by, like, I agree she should have been punished for what she did, but Ted Bundy didn't even receive this many. Like, he didn't even receive a death sentence, and he killed way more people.
Right. No, they definitely
Like
went a little extreme.
6
Also,
death sentences. You
right,
can't kill a person 6 times.
right,
Like,
exactly.
be so fucking for real right now.
That's how I feel about like multiple life sentences. Like, I think in
Like,
your
"Oh, you're gonna spend the next 579 years in jail." Bitch, you're gonna die in jail. You
right,
could've just said that.
definitely
You
on
could've just said that.
sentencing. I'm not a fan of sentencing like that. I think it's annoying.
I
Um,
think it doesn't I personally feel like our justice system has went from something that is supposed to be about reform to something that is now just about showmanship. If
it feels
that like
more, yeah, it feels more based in vindication. Like, ooh,
yeah,
I
like
bet you
there's
feel
no like
vindicated. But like, what do you gain from like, she's gonna die one time. What are you gonna do with the other five? Bring her back?
what are you gonna bring her back to kill her 5 more times? Like, let me revive you to get to serve out your other death sentences.
Right?
Like, it's just a little extreme to me. Like when people get sentenced to like 600 years in prison, you're not gonna fucking live that long.
Yeah,
Like, let's
exactly.
be honest, you're not gonna live that long.
Yeah.
I just feel like there is no there was a lot of things that was wrong with her case. One, the prosecutor who was not the prosecutor, the lawyer on her case,
Or
her
defense
lawyer,
attorney.
yes, her attorney was very inexperienced. He was like a court mandated lawyer. He didn't really have any experiences in like cases like this. And so, I mean, like his real only advice was to plead out. And even whenever, during the ruling, whenever they stated that, I think it was Charles, yeah. So Charles, when they were trying to get in admitted that like about him like raping people prior and like doing all like his criminal past, that should have been brought up during the trial.
Right. That should
Like those
not have
are things that you bring up during the trial to the jury and basically tell them
that
like
she's
hey, like you
justified.
need to establish that like this person had a criminal history and her lawyer didn't do that. Like he's asking for it during the sentencing. But also when I said that Aileen kind of bites herself in the ass, um after she got sentenced, she looked at the jury and I want to say I'm quoting this correctly, but she looked at the jury and said, I was raped. And something along the lines of, like, I was raped and I hope that you get raped also for not believing me, essentially. Yeah, she was basically like, I
Bold.
hope you get raped in the ass. Fuck you.
Bold. You know what? Honestly, this kind of tracks for everything. I
Like,
feel
I
like
mean, it's hard to believe that somebody killed somebody in self-defense when you tell the jury that I
yeah, but
hope you get
after
raped in the ass because I was raped and you didn't fucking, you just didn't fucking believe me. And so,
I feel like if I got 6 counts of the death penalty, I too wouldn't care and would probably tell everybody in the room to go fuck themselves too. Like, you know what I mean? At that point in time,
but
after the life she led,
it was Arlene's fault.
fair,
It
fair.
was Arlene's fault because Arlene was like, tell them the truth. God will forgive you. And yes, God will forgive you. But listen, if you kill 6 people,
You
I'm
killed
not
6
saying go
people.
up there and lie. I ain't telling you that. Don't go up there and lie.
Here's
But
here's
don't
where
go up there and tell them that you killed them people.
right. Here's where I stand on like I definitely think that like she got dealt a bad hand in the sense of her legal counsel because I
You got
feel
dealt a bad hand in life.
right, but I feel like when it came to this trial, I think that as her attorney, I probably would have built a case around her traumatic past, the other trauma she's faced, And I would have turned her into a victim and probably gone to more of like an insanity defense,
So they
given
tried
her
to
a
do
life
that.
sentence with like mental health reformation. Like the fact that she got the death penalty makes me wonder of how well the case was built or how well she was
So,
coached as the
so I don't think she was coached very well. But also remember how I told you she had like a little temper? Like she
yeah,
would just randomly like lash the fuck out.
yeah.
So she was on the stand. She was doing a great job when she was being questioned by her own attorney. And when it came to cross examinations, you got to see like glimpses of like this very scary person. Like a person who you're like, damn, like she really could have killed them. Like she's no longer this innocent victim, this innocent, tiny, petite lady who like can't hurt a fly. She turns into like this vicious Rottweiler of a fucking woman. And it's like, uh, that temper, I could kind of see how she,
Yeah.
unallowed them men. And so it's kind of like, if I were to be her attorney, I honestly would have never put her on the stand. She would have never taken the stand. And I say that because of how unpredictable her behavior is. She can't portray herself as a victim. Now,
True.
one thing that her attorneys didn't do, they didn't bring witnesses to the stand on her behalf.
All
Like
right.
she had no witnesses to like talk about her character, her as a person, like nobody.
But who did she have other than this ex-girlfriend, right?
And I
We
mean, she was
established she
already
had
on the
no friends.
defense's side.
Yeah.
But I mean, okay, hear me out. What I would have did, I would have gotten her Johns. I know this sounds contradictory, but I would have gotten her Johns to come up and like testify for her, like the ones that she was nice to,
The one
obviously,
she
and
didn't
that
murder, yeah.
yeah, but like I would have gotten them to like come up on the stand and like talk about like their time. Like maybe that would have helped like humanize her. I feel like she got 6 fucking death sentences because she wasn't humanized. Like they didn't really see her as a human. They saw her as a Rottweiler of a fucking woman who just murdered 7 men, and they were like, this bitch got to get off the streets.
Right. That's probably why Ted Bundy didn't get that many deaths, because he was, Zac Efron. He was Zac Efron of the day and age. Who I
I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he didn't get on the stand though, did he?
Ted Bundy, he ended up being his own lawyer.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. So
I
everybody
forgot.
watched him, and then I don't know how based it is, how true it is, but I know in the
Honestly,
movie he like got engaged
Ted
right in front of
Bundy's energy
everybody.
is my energy. I fully feel like I'm not even trying to be funny. I fully feel like I would be the best person for the case. I would be like, yeah, I'm just gonna do this shit myself because I don't trust you bitches.
Well, that's the thing. When he was in prison, he studied law, and I'm pretty sure that that's what he was going to school for, if I remember correctly. While this was all happening, was he was a law student, so he was incredibly smart and like knew what he was doing. So yeah, like he was pretty valid when his like attorneys weren't doing their job well. And that's probably how Ted Bundy got a lighter sentence than maybe he
That
deserved.
is
Not to say that like
my
death isn't a bad sentence, but
that is my that's my toxic trait, that I believe that if I were to ever be on trial for literally anything, I fully believe that I could be my own attorney.
yeah, I mean, same. You just have to have a good argument.
I like, and if all else fails, I just plead insanity.
You think I'm sane? I'm up here defending myself. I'm obviously crazy. You know what I mean? It could
I
work.
would get the psychiatrist to literally testify in my defense and be like, yeah, no, that bitch is actually insane.
Yeah, she's crazy. Why are you letting her defend herself?
I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I would literally, I'm not gonna say that. Intrusive thoughts coming in again.
Intrusive thoughts.
We're gonna stop right there. There are things that I can't say on this podcast because they'll get me in a lot of trouble.
Oh my god.
So, but anyway, that's my toxic trait, is that I think that I can defend myself. Um, but yeah, like, how attorneys want shit?
Yeah, I feel like she probably had bad attorneys on this. I feel like they didn't build a good case. I don't
How
know.
attorneys want shit?
For her to get
It
6,
was
like,
6.
6 death sentences, I don't know. I really could, like, I feel like what she should have gotten had somebody been doing their job is it should have been a life sentence, but in, psychiatric care.
Yeah, like, I feel like they didn't bring in any of, like, her childhood. They didn't bring in any of, they didn't bring in any of the struggles from her childhood. They didn't bring in any of the struggles of, like, her life leading up to this point. They didn't bring in any like witnesses on her case, like even if they weren't like witnesses to talk about her character, they could have been witnesses to talk about her childhood. Like she had a best friend, so she had friends, she had a best friend. Her best friend could have testified for her in her childhood. They could have literally brought her best friend up on the stand and been like, hey, like were you ever a witness to Aileen being abused by her grandfather? What age was this? How do you think that affected her? Like, how did that affect you at such a young age? About how many, like, they could have did things to help her, but instead she just pleaded guilty and got more fucking life sentences. And she kind of says it in the documentary, but I think honestly, the reason that she just comes to like this, I just want to get this shit over with mindset is because, I mean, like, she wasn't wrong. There's like 4 or 5,000 people on death row. There's like a 1% chance that you're getting off that shit. And every single person who has gotten off, it was on DNA evidence, the reason that they got off. Like, it was hardcore evidence, the reason that they got off. And usually it's at the last second. Like, you're in the
Yeah.
chair being strapped down. And
Yeah,
they're like, all right, stop. Like, imagine how terrifying that is.
I know. And I bet that this happening to her was probably like the last straw, like like knowing that she was obviously struggling with suicide. She's probably like,
Because it's
yeah, take me
also
out at this
not,
freaking point. You know what I mean?
I mean, but it's also like at that point, it's also like you not only have to get over one death sentence, you would have to literally get over all 6.
Yeah.
So it's like that's literally an uphill fucking battle because it's like, yeah, you got one overturned, but you still got 5 more waiting.
Right?
I'm not trying to laugh because it's not funny, but it's like, yeah, you do all that hard ass work to get one of them bitches overturned, and you got 5 more sitting behind it. You
Right.
got to do that 5 more times in order to not die.
And clearly
There
her
was no
attorneys were
way she
good.
was. There was no way she was ever getting off that.
Right. No, I definitely agree. I mean, part of me wonders if like she was given bad attorneys in a sense because she was a woman and in like what, the late 80s is when this was happening. I bet women weren't being taken seriously. Like, I don't know. Like,
So Aileen was definitely suffering from, like, in my opinion, some type of psychosis or like some type of mental breakdown. She fully believed that the police had known about her and had known that she had murdered since the very first murder. And like, this is something that she said. So she fully believed that the police had known about her since the very first murder, and they allowed her, quote unquote, to become a serial killer so they could make money off of her.
see, that's a crazy person talking. That is
But
delusion.
okay, but hear me out. They were getting Hollywood deals off of her before her trial had even concluded. Like, before she had even like finished being sentenced, there were like officers, like, they had to step down because they had received money to talk about her case that had not been settled yet.
Yes, the police are corrupt. Part 905 of what's wrong with the justice system in America.
So I'm like, I don't think that they just watched you kill 7 people and was like, all right, yeah, we should stop her now that she's a serial killer. But I also feel like that kind of like maybe she was on to something, but at the same time, like she fully believed this. Like this wasn't like she believed this. Like you could tell she believed it just based off the way she was talking.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, it's kind of dicey because it's like, on one hand, you know her mental health is in the shitter, but then on the other hand, it's kind of like you did kill 7 people
Yeah.
allegedly. Because I mean, like the 7th one wasn't found. He could just be
Lucy
alive
was dead.
walking around. She could have just stole his car.
Right. Yeah,
I
I don't
mean,
know. At the end of the
yeah,
day,
I'm just
6 death sentences, way too extreme. It should have been a life sentence incarcerated with psychiatric evaluation and like mental health care, but like probably no parole option either, just to keep her in check. She's in there until she dies.
yeah, like I just 6 death sentences is wild. Like she was in that, like even them trying, so like in the documentary that like I used for a little bit of the research, they were basically talking about how it was gonna be easier essentially for her to plead guilty, and then they would have more time to work on getting her off.
That's a choice.
I'm laughing because that's a horrible idea.
Yeah, that's a decision. That is
That
a
is the worst
wow.
decision you could possibly make as a lawyer. Like 6 death sentences and you thought you were going to get her off on all 6. Cuz once again, just cuz you overturn one, you still got 5 more waiting behind it.
Right.
I feel like he didn't think that through.
Nope, it didn't. Did not.
Yeah. But then it was also a little confusing because I was like, she had a public defender, but then she also had like, so she had a female public defender on her team who honestly was like kind of making a little bit of sense. And then I don't know if she switched lawyers or what, but then she had this guy on her attorney team also. And like, he was the one that really wasn't making no sense.
Yeah, men don't.
Like, I'm not trying to be funny, but like it was like at one point during like one of her um what are they called, like whenever you have to, I think it's like her appeals, like one point during the appeal they like brought one of the documentary makers up on the stand and they were like, you guys called this the 7 joint ride, and it was because the attorney was like smoking weed on the way to go talk to her. And apparently he had smoked like 7 blunts on the way to go like give her fucking legal advice.
Yeah, probably not the guy you want as your leading counsel.
Yeah. I don't know. I will say like I fully have respect for those victims and their families, and she definitely deserved to be punished for what she did. But however,
However,
6 death sentences
yeah,
is very, very harsh. It's
right.
very, very harsh for someone who went from petty crimes of, well, I guess they're not petty because it was armed robbery, but like from someone who went to like from like armed robbery to murder, and like you could see that they had a hard life. I feel like it was just harsh.
No, I agree. Definitely don't want to minimize what it is that those victims went through. Obviously, murder is terrible. Being murdered, awful. Definitely the worst way to go out. But like, I don't know, 6 death sentences is pretty harsh. So like,
Yeah, it's like hard with her because it's like, damn, like you did deserve to be punished, but probably not to that extent.
right. I agree. I definitely agree.
Anyway, let's keep going. Aileen's final days were as dramatic and tumultuous as her life had been. Initially locked up on death row at the Florida Department of Corrections, Broward Correctional Institution, she was later moved to the Florida State Prison for her execution. Despite an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1996, her fate seemed sealed. By 2001, Aileen had made up her mind to end all legal battles. In a petition to the Florida Supreme Court, she declared her desire to dismiss her lawyers and halt all ongoing appeals. Her chilling words were that she killed those men, robbed them as cold as ice, and she'd do it again too. There was no chance of keeping her alive or anything because she'd kill again. She had hate crawling through her system, and she was simply sick of hearing people call her crazy.
You know what?
So,
At least she knows herself.
I mean, I find that really sad though, because it's like they kept having to go through these appeals and appeals and appeals. And at some point, like, I really do think that she realized at some point, like, damn, there's a 1% chance that I'm going to get off this shit. And even if they do overturn the first one, like I said, they still got 5 more to overturn. So we still gonna have to keep going through this shit for years. Like, yeah, they could have kept going through it and going through it, but at that point, she probably would have just died in prison anyway.
Right. No.
I
Yeah.
will say though, she was a little delusional when she thought that she was going to get off and go live with her adopted mother on her farm. And I'm like, girl, you killed 7 people. You was
Yeah.
never getting out of jail.
But I think that also kind of speaks to her like being upset with constantly being called crazy, because I bet that felt really invalidating to like her holistic experience, versus like the other like specific crimes she committed. You know what I mean? Like to be told that you're like crazy as a rape victim and you're like trying to really like go to this vulnerable space. Like I bet that kind of hurt, and I bet she's pretty over it. Like I
Yeah.
I don't know, like yes, she killed all these people, but I think we've also established that she's pretty delusional. So I don't know, maybe thinking she was going to be able to get off and live with her adopted mother was like that last bit of hope she had. But once that was like gone, she was probably like, I am done. I'm done being invalidated. I'm done being treated bad. Like, get me out of here. Get me off this planet. You know what I mean? So I definitely
Yeah.
feel for this girl, but
I don't know. I feel bad for her too. Like, once again, I feel like a lot of times I do like choose between like the victims and like obviously like the perpetrator, but I feel like in her case it's just really hard to choose between the two because it's kind of just like damn, like this did happen to you and that does suck and I hate it for you. But
yeah.
she had been evaluated so many times, so she knew that she was competent, sane, and trying to tell the truth. In the end, she claimed that she seriously hated human life and would kill again. Despite her attorneys arguing that she wasn't mentally fit to make such a decision, a panel of court appointed psychiatrists deemed her competent. Side note, if I'm remembering correctly, I think that they got on the stand and talked for like 15 to 20-ish minutes and was like, yeah, she's good.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel
But
like,
they, once again, court appointed psychiatrists.
yeah.
So let's think about the load that these people also had on them. And then, like, we know how bad it is for like court appointed attorneys. So, like, I could only imagine how it is for court appointed psychiatrists.
Right. Yeah.
But they deemed her competent. And in 2002, Aileen began making unsettling accusations against the prison staff, claiming that they were contaminating her food with dirt, saliva, and urine.
Oh my
She
god.
believed they were trying to drive her to suicide before her execution and even alleged they wanted to rape her. Pause. This literally shows that she's not mentally sane. She's
Right.
not mentally stable. Like, this is a prime example of, like, the world is out to get me.
Yeah, that's some serious paranoia. And I'm sure that that's developed when you have your dad leave, mom leave, your caregivers and your grandparents are abusing you.
And you're adopted by a 44-year-old woman when you're 36.
Right. Probably hasn't had a
Who
stable,
I
trustworthy
want to
relationship in her life.
say
I mean,
also
Keith
ended up.
back to Keith. Keith left her. Keith, Keith might have given her 10 grand, but Keith moved in with a friend and let her be homeless. So, I mean,
Keith died of esophageal cancer.
yeah, but before that, before he died, she had no place to live, but Keith was living with a friend. She had no place to live. Like, Keith wasn't like, hey, can my sister live here? So, I mean, when you think about it, she probably hasn't had.
Okay, but also, when you think about it though, yes, maybe he could have did that, but realistically, would those kids' parents have let her live with them, knowing her MO, like knowing that she's sleeping with all these guys and knowing that she got pregnant at the age of like 14 and like knowing all these things, do you really think that they would have let her around their son?
Probably not, but they probably should have done the right thing and, like, called, CPS or something. I don't know, but.
Yeah, I find that to be like my biggest issue too. Is like the people who deserve to have CPS called on them, they never get their kids taken. CPS loves to give them chance after chance after chance. I'm just saying.
But anyway,
CPS do better.
I'm sure that this paranoia was developed after, like, never having a good, trustworthy person in her life. So, I mean, yeah, she's probably crazy. She's probably a little crazy. A lot crazy, but a little delulu.
Well, she believed they were trying to drive her to suicide and that they wanted to rape her. Aileen also complained about the harsh treatment she received: strip searches, tight handcuffs, frequent window checks, low water pressure, mildew on her mattress, and constant verbal abuse. If I'm not mistaken, I want to say that Aileen was like in solitary for 23 hours of the day.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, she was, like, longing for, like, human companionship. Like, in her later years, she really she genuinely just didn't see other humans besides, like, the guards or, like, the prison staff. So she threatened to boycott showers and meals when certain officers were on duty, stating that in the meantime, her stomach would be growling away and she was taking showers through the sink of her cell. Her lawyer remarked that Aileen simply wanted humane treatment until her execution day, insisting she believed what she wrote. In the weeks leading up to her execution, Aileen spoke extensively with documentarian, whew, big words, with documentarian Nick Broomfield, and she talked about her impending meeting with God, Jesus, and the angels, expressing a sense of anticipation about what lay beyond. However, she also continued to allege mistreatment at the prison. Oh my gosh. Whew. Claiming her mind was tortured and her head subjected to sonic pressure. She accused the prison staff of poisoning her food and escalating abuses each time she logged a complaint, suggesting they were trying to make her appear insane or drive her to insanity. Her frustration boiled over in her final interview, where she lashed out at society, quoting, this is a direct quote: "You sabotaged my ass. Society and the cops and the system. A raped woman got executed and was used for books and movies and shit." End quote. Her last on camera words were a bitter farewell. Quote, "Thanks a lot, society, for railroading my ass." End quote. Honestly, if you gotta go out and them gotta be your last words on camera,
Right? She picked some good ones.
she picked some good last words. She did.
You know, again, I'm gonna say it again.
Society did railroad her ass, though.
Right? We support women's rights. We support women's wrongs.
I hate that I feel for her so much because
Right.
I really, you really want to not like the murderer. But it's like, it's not that I like her. It's just that, like, it's two sides to every coin. And she got the shitty sides of both sides of the coin. Like, for some
Right.
reason, the coin that she picked up had shit on both sides of it.
Right. She definitely didn't get dealt a good hand either way. So I mean, I understand, why she's so angry going out and why she's saying this stuff. And you can't help but be like, you know what, good for you, girl. Because I feel like any person has probably been in that situation where it's like all you want to say is fuck you, fuck your life, you are the worst. And that's probably where she's at. And she's probably saying it to society and like as a whole, but I bet there are other people that she never got the opportunity to like say that to. It's probably like what led to this bottled up rage that came out in these not too great moments. And she just, I don't know. So maybe she found some peace in doing stuff like that. But like, I don't know. We
I
support
mean,
women's
I
rights. We
will
support women's wrongs.
say, I'm like, I will say that I'm like happy that I guess like she found peace in religion, because like at least that gave her like something to look forward to, like after she died. And maybe she was just done with this because she was like, well, damn, I was dealt a bad hand here. Like, it can't be much worse on the other side. And like, yeah, that sucks, but
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the afterlife was going to give her the peace that she never got in life.
yeah, maybe. Dawn Botkins, a childhood friend of Aileen, later clarified to Broomfield that Aileen's angry outbursts were directed at society and the media at large, not him personally. So, yeah. Like, I don't know. I feel like they could have did more. And I feel like that in a lot of cases, but like definitely in hers, like they definitely could have did more for her.
Yeah. She was just dealt a rough hand. She didn't make the best choices. She definitely needed to be punished for her actions, but what she received was pretty severe. I don't know. I what was the original question that started this? Whose side are we on? Or yeah,
I
I
think it
don't
was
know.
more of like, do we think that she's a victim also?
No, she's 100% also a victim.
Yeah, I feel like she's like a victim of like society,
Yeah. No, I agree.
and like a victim of like what happens when like you treat your kids poorly.
Right.
Because it's like from the start, she like 14-year-old mom, 18-year-old dad, giving up to grandparents who don't give a fuck about you. They're beating you. You got raped by the neighborhood pedophile. You had his child. And then I didn't do a very good job at like explaining it, but she was very upset about the child. Not the fact that she like had to give the child away, but more so the fact that they didn't like let her hold the child or see the child or like even interact with the child. And like, I can only imagine holding something in my body for 9 months and then giving birth to it.
And
And
it's like
then,
ripped away from you pretty much.
yeah, like she literally pushed this baby out. And I like, from what I understood, she didn't even like get to hold the baby. Like, she pushed the baby out, pushed out the placenta, and the baby was like immediately taken away.
Yeah. Yeah, that was probably traumatizing in and of itself. You know what I
And
mean?
mind you, she's
So,
like 14 when this happened.
right.
So, yeah. On October 9th, 2002, Aileen was executed by lethal injection. Instead of eating a traditional last meal for under $20, however, she asked for a cup of coffee. Her last words were haunting, and this is what she had to say. Quote, "Yes, I would like to say that I'm sailing with the rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th, like the movie. Big mothership and all. I'll be back. I'll be back." End quote. She was dead at 9:47 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Aileen was the second woman in Florida and the 10th in the United States to be executed since the 1976 Supreme Court decision that reinstated capital punishment. Following Aileen's execution, her body was cremated and her ashes were scattered under a tree in Michigan by her childhood friend, Dawn Bodkins. As she requested, a song called Carnival was played at her funeral. It was a song by Natalie Merchant from the album Tiger Lily. The song had provided her peace while she was on death row. Aileen, Life and Death of a Serial Killer, Close Merchant, gave the song to Nick Broomfield to close his documentary.
Those are some interesting last words. Those are
Yeah.
some crazy lady last words. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that song was given to him to close his documentary, Aileen, Life and Death of a Serial Killer, and after she was told about it. In reflection, Natalie said that when director Nick Broomfield sent a working edit of the film, she was so disturbed by the subject matter that she couldn't even watch it. Aileen Wuornos led a torturing life that was beyond her worst nightmares. It wasn't until she was told that Aileen spent many hours listening to her album Tiger Lily while on death row and requested Carnival to be played at her funeral that she gave permission for the use of the song. It was very odd to think of the places her music could go once it left her hands. If it gave Aileen some solace, Natalie was grateful. Nick Broomfield, the documentarian who retraced Aileen's steps, has his theories about her psychology and reasoning. He felt her anger was indeed deep and accumulated over the years. The trauma of being a prostitute and the terrible encounters she had night after night finally manifested into the out of ordinary violence which she felt served her well in keeping her alive. Broomfield would go as far as to suggest that indeed Aileen did believe that she was acting in self defense, but her psychosis had been so severe that she was unable to differentiate between an actual threat on her life and a minor scuffle. These minor scuffles resulted in deadly outbursts by Aileen, but not without remorse, as she would later claim. Aileen is described whenever Aileen is described, whatever her moods, by Broomfield as being exquisitely human in her demeanor. So, yeah.
At least in the end, somebody respected her wishes. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, hopefully that brought some peace to her soul.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, honestly, I found it very nice that the artist allowed them to use that song in like the documentary of her life.
Which I feel like definitely speaks to the dialogue we've been having, just kind of about how this is a little gray area of a case. Like, I feel like once you hear about her as a person outside of this criminal, it's like, yeah, okay. Like, it's a little tricky to say that, like, you were a bad person when it's like, oh, well, if I went through the mountain that she went through, who's to say that I would have been as well adjusted or I wouldn't have made similar choices?
I feel like there are two ways that people go when things like this happen to them in their childhood, and either they grow up to be like very, very successful people who like beat the odds, or they grow up to be like Aileen, and not necessarily in the way of like murderers, but like they go on to live just very hard lives. And like
Right.
I feel like she just had a very hard life.
No, I agree. I mean, it's similar in the case of like having an alcoholic parent. You could have somebody like the child could easily like lean into it and follow the footsteps, or they could go the other extreme and like be completely sober. So I think it depends on who you are as a person, and how other pieces and aspects of your life shape you. But knowing that she basically went from one fire to another, it's like, yeah, no wonder she turned out the way she did and made the decision she did, because she had no support system. There's nothing there for her. She had no friends, she had no
Yeah.
family.
She had that 69-year-old yacht club president.
She did. She did have a sugar daddy who she did beat him with a cane though.
Yeah, probably wasn't the best decision. But experts often attribute Aileen to her psychology and her tormented upbringing. When tested using the psychopath checklist, she scored 32 out of 40, which placed her above the cutoff of 30, the hallmark of psychopathy. Furthermore, Aileen qualified for a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. Psychologist Bryce Ergo further explores Aileen Wuornos' tormented background, in which he attributes childhood sexual abuse and years of prostitution as contributing factors in destroying her psyche. As expected, this research has found that psychopathy is merely a result of her traumatic experiences, which began since childhood. Among the significant experiences were her biological mother leaving her and her grandmother failing to acknowledge the severe issues that Aileen was undergoing, and this neglect caused a mother daughter relationship bond to be lost during her childhood. This situation worsened when she was 11 years old and learned that her grandparents, who she thought were her parents, were not her biological parents. This, in turn, further damaged the bond that was already weak with her foster parents. And as a child, Aileen displayed several behavior problems, including having an explosive temper that prevented her from creating and maintaining friendships. Studies have found that her early background, characterized by physical and sexual abuse, is closely linked to her diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. Such profound trauma could disrupt the mind's development in such an extent that to such an extent that primitive, dissociative, and splitting defenses are mobilized to manage overwhelming emotional and sexual experiences that a child is unable to integrate. FBI profiler Robert K. Russler briefly covers Aileen in his memoir about his career and 2 decades with the FBI. Writing in 1992, he noted that it is more usual for female serial killers to go on killing sprees than to commit serial murders. Aileen was simply an exception to the rule. Russler, credited as the man who came up with the term serial killer to describe an individual who kills for the sake of personal satisfaction, regarded Aileen as an exception. He set her apart from women who kill because of postpartum psychosis and women who murder strictly for money, such as females who have killed a string of paying brides or spouses. So, yeah. He basically said Aileen was fucked up.
I mean, she was. She was.
And can't argue with that. What was really intriguing about Aileen's case was how her mental illness barely played a role in her trial or the media frenzy that surrounded it. Despite being deemed mentally unstable and diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, by defense psychiatrists, none of it swayed the court. Aileen was sentenced to death regardless. The process of evaluating someone's mental fitness for trial and deciding between institutionalization or prison or execution is incredibly complex. Aileen wasn't the first or last mentally ill person to be executed in the United States. Watching the news coverage of her trial as captured by Nick Broomfield in his documentaries, you'll notice a complete lack of discussion about her mental state. Instead, the media painted her as a greedy and sexually deviant, portraying her as a prostitute who seduced men, murdered them, and ran off with their money alongside her lesbian lover. Interestingly, Aileen herself saw her life in a similar light, imagining herself as part of a sort of gay Bonnie and Clyde duo. According to friends, there wasn't a clear narrative for female serial killers like there was for their male counterparts. So instead of delving into her mental illness or her horrific childhood, the media fixated on her being a prostitute and a lesbian, reinforcing the broad stereotypes about women. Aileen's sexuality was a hot topic. Broomfield often asked the men in her life if she hated men and how she could continue having sex with them if she did. He interviewed one of her regular clients who shared stories about Aileen's sexual fantasies with a tabloid. These fantasies, unsettling when viewed in the context of her crimes, involved scenarios like being tied up and raped by a man wearing a hood. More revealing, this man's response when Broomfield asked if he thought Aileen hated men, he hadn't considered her mental state much, even though she had already been sentenced to death. He speculated that she took sex however she could get it, without caring much whether her partner was a man or a woman. Like many, he assumed she became a prostitute to monetize on her nymphomania. The idea that were Alien's relationships with women indicated a genuine sexual preference was beyond his comprehension, as it was for many of her friends. This lack of understanding about Aileen's mental health and the simplistic portrayal of her sexuality highlighted the broader issues in how society and the media has always dealt with complex figures like her.
Yeah. Had a feeling that like her mental health probably wasn't a huge focus, knowing the time period, which like probably speaks to the narrative around just her story and the way that the trial went. So I'm not surprised. This doesn't surprise
Honestly,
me.
if you watch the documentary or like even like kind of like read papers from that time, because I when I'm doing research for cases like this, I find a lot of information in old newspapers. It tells a lot, like old newspapers, how the media portrayed the perpetrator and the victims. Like it gives you a lot of insight into what those people were like thinking back then. And if you read those newspapers, they portray her as just what I said, like a money motivated sexual prostitute. Like it doesn't really cover any of her mental health. It literally the person that they're referring to, he's actually on the documentary, and like you could tell like when they asked him the question of like, do you think that Aileen hated men, or like do you think she enjoyed having sex with men, it was just like beyond comprehension for him to think that she wouldn't have enjoyed sex with him.
Right.
Like it was more so of like, I think she just liked sex, period.
Yeah.
And then like he was more upset that the media had taken his words and kind of like twisted them into something else, which I mean, fair that you're upset, but he was
Right.
more upset about that than like her facing the death penalty. Like he was like, I don't know where they got the fact that like she wanted to be tied up and then shot in the head and that's what would help her climax the actual kill.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, definitely a
He was like,
choice.
I never said that. Like he was more upset about that than he was like you could just tell like whenever they asked him the question of like, do you think she hated men? He was just kind of like, what? Like
Right.
why would she
Yeah.
hate men? Like she slept with men. Like It
Right.
was just beyond, it was unfathomable for him to think that she didn't have a good time with him,
Right.
which is wild because as someone who has slept with a man before,
As someone that slept with a man before, hit or miss on if it's a good time.
it's really, I wouldn't even say it's 50-50. It's like
It's like,
75-25.
I was gonna say like 80-20.
75-25. Ooh, yeah. Actually, I'm gonna go with yours, 80-20. Because what the hell?
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you'd be like, why are you even here? What are we
Why
doing?
did I do this?
Right? And then you're just like disappointed.
Yeah.
Anyway, not to overshare.
But I don't know. Like, I feel like there was a lot of things that were overlooked in her case. I feel like there were a lot of things that, like, could have been done better. But after you get 6 death sentences, I probably would have told society that they railroaded me also.
Yeah, I feel for this girl in
I'm
that
not trying to
sense.
be funny, but they literally fucked her in the ass and railroaded her. So, like, I could see how she felt that way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely think they did. I definitely don't think you should be going out and murdering a whole bunch of people, but she
Yeah,
definitely
like,
needs to
I
hold a
definitely
fair
feel for
hand.
the victims' families, but I also feel for her in a way. And, like, I am very quick to be like, just because you had a shitty childhood doesn't mean anything. But like most of the time, when people have shitty childhoods in these cases, they at least grow up and have like somewhat normal adulthood lives. Like they grow up and get married and have kids, and like they lead at least like semi normal adulthood lives. Like they get jobs. She never really had like a real job. She was a prostitute from the age of 14 until like the day she got fucking arrested. And before she got arrested, she had been arrested several other times on things like armed robbery and theft and like things like that. So it's like you were in and out of the system. I mean,
Yeah.
like, luckily this time the police did do their job, but I feel like our justice system really did fail her.
No, it definitely did. She didn't get the help she needed. She didn't get the support she needed. She was set up to fail. And hopefully in the afterlife she had some peace.
Yeah, maybe she will be back on June 6th with God and the angels. It's coming up, so maybe
Did
we'll
she give a
see, Aileen.
year or it's just any June 6th? We should be on the
She didn't give
lookout.
a year. She
Okay.
just said, I'll be back on Independence Day, June 6th. I don't
Solid.
know whose Independence Day is on June 6th. Um, I mean, correct me in the comments, guys, if I'm wrong, but I don't think America's Independence Day is June 6th.
It is not July 4th. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, you see what I mean? Like, what the fuck is June 6th? I feel like I need to like look this up now. What the fuck is June 6th?
Let's see.
Not me immediately going to my calendar and seeing if there's some like, have I been missing something these last 25 years?
June 6th.
Nothing is on June 6th. So I have
Independence.
no clue what she was talking about.
The closest it looks like, according to Google, is it's the National Day of Sweden on the 6th of June.
Oh, well, baby girl, we ain't in Sweden.
The Independence Day of Brazil is September
We not
7th. I
in
don't know why
Brazil
that
either.
came up. We're D-Day, June 6th.
Maybe she's talking about D-Day.
Maybe. Why did I type in June 6th and I keep getting Brazil's Independence Day? Anyway.
Because
Just
that's the
September
only
7th.
Independence Day that's in June. But I don't know. I really do feel bad for her. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel for her too. I definitely
Yeah.
think she was a victim. I think she didn't necessarily get what she deserved. She deserved a little bit of kindness, a little bit of sympathy, a little bit of just like a little bit more care for her mental well-being. I would not have given her 6 death sentences. That's definitely a pretty extreme and harsh choice. Again, I think a life sentence with no chance of parole probably would have been a better fit. But yeah. Don't go around murdering people, but I don't know. I don't think she got what she deserved. She deserved a little less, a little bit more peace. But hopefully she has that in death.
Hopefully. All right. Now, the question that I asked you guys, my listeners, in the beginning. Now that we've gotten to know her a little bit more, are we still facing that dilemma? Should Aileen have faced the consequences of what she did? And if not, how can we justify her actions? Thank you so much for listening, guys. All right, guys, that one was a doozy. And if I'm being honest, I feel like it left us with more questions than answers. But shout out to Mason, because this was the first woman that I covered on my podcast series. And
Shout out to Mason.
yeah, shout out to Mason. And Megan, shout out to you, because I chose this case for you because you are the first female guest that I've had on my podcast. So I feel like it kind of went together. First female American serial killer, first female on my podcast to guest.
Yeah.
And you for sure won't be the last. So I'm super happy about that. But guys, thank you so much for listening to my podcast today. Thank you, Megan, for being a guest on today's podcast.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for having me. I loved it. I loved the conversation. What?
No, nothing. You are so welcome. Why did you make that so awkward?
I don't know.
You made that so awkward.
I wasn't ready to say thank you. I wasn't ready for goodbyes.
It's okay. But thank you.
To do this again.
We're not going to do this again. I'm leaving all this shit in there, and I'm so serious when I say that. I love bloopers.
Perfect.
But thank you, Megan, for agreeing to be on my podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to sit and record this with me. I really, really do appreciate it.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for having me. It was lovely to learn about Aileen. This was great. I love being the first woman. I'm here to say
Aileen was a doozy, not gonna lie.
Love that.
Thank you guys once again for listening to my podcast and supporting me. Make sure to sign up for my email list so that you'll always be notified when new episodes drop every single time, baby. And make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on all of my socials at The Serial Zodiac. And like I always stay safe, stay curious, and stay suspicious. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye. See you next time.